All right, back on with Kurt Wuckert Jr. This is Gavin Mehl. Good to see you, Kurt. How you doing, buddy?
Good to be here. Happy, healthy, well rested, like all of that jazz. So we're good. It's good to see
Nice,
you again.
man. Really appreciate having you back. I mean, it's been a minute. You and I met a number of times now. We talk, and I watch your Coin Geek show every week. It's amazing, all the content you have, and then you got a big Twitter audience. A lot of people love you, and a lot of people hate you on there. And it's always just the same debates about things. So yeah, I wanted to just get your perspective on things that are going on right now. A couple of topics and ideas was potential debate with a BTC guy that you were considering doing. What's going on with the Teranode project?
Mm-hmm.
What you're doing with Gorilla Pool? Any updates with like how that's playing out? Anything else that CoinGeek is up to that you think is really important, and also get your perspective as well about. I mean, you probably saw the Craig Wright trial videos got leaked online by somebody, and I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know what to say. It wasn't me,
yeah,
so I know that, but
yeah.
somebody watched them, so I want to get your perspective on that. So yeah,
Sure.
why don't you just start out with what you've been up to, man?
So a lot of stuff with Gorilla Pool. The Teranode development stuff is in full swing. It's basically done as far as I'm concerned, but I'm not the security audit guy, and it's that person's job is a very difficult job because if there's some 0 day exploit or something that's in the code, and there's all kinds of problems. I'm very cavalier as far as software goes, and so I look at Teranode as like, man, let's just run it. Why not? And but I mean, that's the difference between an entrepreneur and a security engineer. But
How long term is Teranode? I mean, I'm trying to like think and dumb it down for me to like seventh grade level. Like I'm thinking like the highways in
mhm,
California, they were built like we didn't need those highways back in the day. I mean,
sure.
but then 20 years later we needed them. So I mean, how long term is this Teranode project to where people are actually going to need to use this?
That's actually that's like the best question. So because a lot of people will say like, well, why build the highways if nobody's going to use them? Where's the demand? And I think there's a push pull on whether you're creating demand or whether demand creates supply, right? And I think it's a both and the both and thing. California is a really good example. A lot of people, your typical conservative view of things in like the 1960s and 70s is like, why are we spending so much money on highways? Nobody lives here. And now the highways are severely insufficient in California because the population has exploded. And there's a lot of reasons why that population has exploded, but one of them could be, well, infrastructure invited people to come build in California. And so that's kind of the argument that's being made here with Teranode is like, look, blockchains have achieved multiple trillions of dollars worth of adoption globally, but that adoption is almost entirely in like the derivative assets and paper trading and ETFs and whatever's going on at Binance and that kind of thing. But is anybody actually using a blockchain for their business? Is there something happening in blockchain that is enabling like powerful use of the technology? And like there's a couple of examples. There's a few things going on, in like a weird cycle will happen on Solana and then will happen on Ethereum and then will kind of happen over here and there. And then there's like the token of the week that sort of pops off during a bull market. And then it all goes away for another 2 years while the bears are there and liquidity drops to nothing. And then it just sucks for 2 years. And you get the next group of people who are trying to come up with some other thing. Well, BSV has been what, 7 years in that cycle. So basically two whole bull and bear cycles saying like, look, we are going to focus like a laser beam on building infrastructure for not just next gen, but like next gen, so that when you build it, everyone can come. And so if we talk about volumes, we're talking about the capability right now to do 1 million transactions a second. So to put that in perspective of like BTC is capable of like 7 transactions a second, Ethereum's capable of something like 15. Bitcoin Cash, which claims to be a scalable version of Bitcoin, probably 250 transactions a second or something right now before it tops out. Then you can move over to, your kind of L2s and ZK rollups. And there's a lot of like newfangled L2, L3 stuff that claims, 5 to 10,000 transactions a second in like an Ethereum paradigm. And then Solana claims to be able to do something like 65 to 85,000 transactions per second. But there's a huge caveat on that, in that about 85% of those transactions are about internal consensus finding. So that means only about 10,000 transactions a second are available for doing real peer-to-peer payments and that kind of thing. And so there's lots of stuff in the space that is not really scalable. Some of it claims to be, and the ones that really can't scale claim that scaling is a scam. Like you don't need to scale anyways. And so there's all of that. So we're talking like 3 or 4 orders of magnitude faster than the whole rest of the blockchain economy is what we're talking about with Teranode. But if you look at the real world economy, if you look at like Visa, for example, Visa is capable of a real honest 65,000 transactions per second. That's what Visa's throughput looks like on Black Friday when everybody's at Walmart murdering each other over the latest TVs or whatever. And then you can take things like MasterCard, Fedwire, Swift, global banking, right? Like look at all the financial transactions that are happening among people. That's still less than 1 million transactions per second globally. But you need to have the ability to elastically stretch on a day like Black Friday or on a day like huge moves on the NASDAQ or whatever, like when everybody's trying to trade at once. Like if you want everything to be happening and all of a sudden there's a huge volatility day, well, every trader has got to get their trades in and all of this stuff. So imagine if we had things like New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, Fedwire, Swift, all your credit cards, all your data stuff that's going on, like financial, like accessing identity information, all these other things for global finance. You need that 1 million transactions per second. And so the headroom on that, I think adoption looks like something like 20 years before something like Teranode is doing so many things where it becomes insufficient, where it starts to show its age. But in 20 years, who knows how many further iterations there will be on something like Teranode. I have Screaming Baby. Can we eliminate Screaming Baby, please?
I can't even hear it, so it's all...
Okay, good. My microphone's very directional, but I wasn't sure. But anyways, so by then, I would hope that the software has improved, the hardware has improved. Maybe there's some kind of major hardware breakthroughs, like all your quantum computing guys have figured out how to change the universe. Like, I think that's a problem where essentially when Teranode launches, it will be capable of dealing with about 20 years of growth and onboarding into a blockchain-based economy. And then by the time that starts topping out, I think we will have iterated past it significantly. So I think this really becomes the basis of the future of global finance is where I'm at. Bold claim, but I think
it's exciting. I mean, as far as I understand, the Visa and not MasterCard network is so archaic that it's built on this 40-year-old technology or maybe older. I mean, that we're still using today. It's just absolutely ripe. It's like desperate for an upgrade.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Big chunks of the economy are running on mainframes that were installed in buildings in the 80s in New York. So, or like weird places like Minneapolis or Milwaukee that you may not suspect. But there are companies that are like, yeah, we put this computer in 1983 and all of our company's business goes through it. And there's a hub that hits Milwaukee. It's like a major internet switch that's there. And a lot of companies built infrastructure there for that reason. But yeah, they're like working on computers that like there's 3 guys left on Earth who know how to program for. And it's really weird.
All right. So that could be a good transition, like on the value add, because help me and our audience understand like what. So if you were talking like, let's say one of the guys at Visa, one of the head decision makers, they're like, well, we want to upgrade, but we got all these other options. And why Bitcoin? Like it's just, we thought that was about something else, like what is the major value add for someone like that?
So a big part of it, in my opinion, is data. So the ability to have, if you look at Andreas Antonopoulos' old book, it's called The Internet of Money. This is like 12 years ago now. He writes this book explaining how it's not just transactions. Like, yeah, you can send $1 to somebody on, well, not $1, but you can send $10 to somebody on PayPal right now. And like, that's pretty novel, or it was in the late 90s, but you can do that with Bitcoin. But the real cool thing about Bitcoin is composability, scriptability, and what else can you send with that payment? What else can kind of be attached to it? What else can you bolster with it? Now, he would back away from all of that now. Like he actually wrote a book called Mastering Ethereum, and he's gone totally different direction. What was the
first book called again that he wrote?
The Internet of Money.
Okay, so that one was prior
it's got to be 2013 2013 or something, I would guess that came out.
That was the
Um,
original block Bitcoin, talking about all the features that it had. Got it.
Yep. And he was the guy at the time. Andreas was the guy that was kind of explaining the tech to basically everybody. You had lots of finance guys. You had your sort of Roger Ver types who were talking about like economics and economic freedom. And then you had any number of people. I can't think of the guy's name. Light haired guy. He was a TradFi guy before, precious metal and stuff. But shoot, what is his name? Forget it now. But anyways, so you had guys that were very much in like the finance, sort of like your Robert Breedlove style show. Like, well, here's why it's going to replace, global reserve assets. And so macroeconomics, that kind of thing. But Andreas was the tech guy. He was the guy that was saying like, hey, here's the really interesting stuff that you can do with the technology. And The Internet of Money was a really inspiring book for me back when I was first learning about Bitcoin and saying, oh, cool, like tokens and smart contracts. And it was archaic, like it hadn't been explored a lot, but he was planting those seeds back then. And then there's a few other guys that started to do it along the way. Another one is Andrew DeSantis. If you've not looked at, I think he's all social media and blogs, but DeSantis really explained out like Bitcoin being capable of doing smart contracts, but not just simple smart contracts, like recursive, like absorb the internet style smart contracts. And that's the power of Bitcoin. So like Visa, for example, is just a payments network. It literally just moves ledger entries from one spot to another spot. But imagine if the movement of that ledger entry could include all kinds of other information. Who knows what that could be? Like Visa is a company with lots of smart people in it that can think of ways that make people use Visa more richly. What are some other things I can be doing with my Visa account? And when you have data and money that are tied together intrinsically, it allows you to become very creative and create an economy that is not just more useful, but more fun, more robust, in many ways more private and more secure, but also at the same time more auditable and more open and more fair. And it's an unlimited opportunity, really.
All right. So why not, speaking to like the crypto crowd, I guess, like, why can't Solana or one of the other networks just do that instead? Or, are they just going after a whole different, audience of just the financial crowd, Are you talking? I mean,
it's so they can up to a certain scale. So scalability is the big one. So it's just like anything else. Like, hey, why would I want a Tesla Model X instead of a Honda Civic, right? And it's like, a Honda Civic is a good vehicle for most people, and it will get a lot of people from point A to point B. But if you want to have more torque and better acceleration, if you don't ever want to stop at a gas station again, and so it's an upgrade to your life to be driving something that is a next gen piece of technology. And so Solana serves a niche right now that is pretty frothy. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on in Solana that is frankly really cool. Like a lot of the UI, UX tools, the trading systems, and all the stuff that are built in Solana are quite good. And they're serving that market and doing it well. The problem is can they do 10x? Like, can they bring in another 2 million people that could use that system? And I think the answer is clearly no. Solana has days every quarter that the entire network takes a crap and needs to be rebooted. And that's at just spikes in today's economy, deciding that they're going to do more on Solana for the day. If too many people decide they're going to do too many things on Solana, it's done. And that's a real problem because there's not some kind of engineering breakthrough coming to Solana that's going to solve these problems. It's slow iterative change, but their fundamental system is already designed the way it's designed. And it's problematic because it is trying to maintain global state, and maintaining global state is a system that just, you really cannot scale the maintenance of maintaining global state. That's why Ethereum can't scale, and all the Ethereum derivatives can't scale either.
Okay. Wow. All right. So this is huge. So let me go over to a guy. He's I guess an old colleague or associate, Paul Stork. He said he wanted to debate or I don't know if he said, but there's talk about debating a BTC
Yeah.
person. This goes back to Craig Wright. He's been wanting to debate somebody about BTC Core, Bitcoin Core for years, and nobody's really stepped up to do that. So sounds like I don't, but Paul Stork is considering doing that. Now that may be tomorrow. You're going to perhaps talk to him on the show. You want to preview that a little bit?
We're talking about it. I'm not positive it'll happen, but Paul's a basically good guy. We disagree on some low-level finer points about Bitcoin generally. Our biggest disagreement is the fact that he thinks everything that isn't happening on BTC will ultimately fail, and I disagree. But he's a believer that BIP 300, this concept of drive chains, which is essentially a variation on the concept of making a side chain. So you create a special purpose blockchain that is locked into a smart contract, and then you have whatever rules you want over on this variation of Bitcoin. It's not a bad idea. It's something that can occur on BTC. It can really happen on any blockchain. It's also similar to the idea between overlay networks and overlay this concept in BSV. So what an overlay is it's basically a special purpose blockchain for a subset of things that are happening on BSV, and then they work in this little tunnel and they settle to BSV when necessary. So it's also actually the base idea, but behind any like layer 2 networking technology is that, okay, the base layer is doing everything at the speed that it does it, and then if you have some special purpose that needs to occur up here, your token protocols, your smart contracts, or whatever, or if you're a company like a company like Money, for example, has its own subset of tokens. So there's the one sat, there's the BRC21 token protocol, and then Money is a subset of that. They don't care about anything except the Money token, so they can run their own infrastructure that only listens to Money tokens, and they can maintain that very trivially without having to run a full node, without having to rely on, really anybody. And then everything else is kind of managed by the miners. Like that's the way that BSV is designed. Drive chains is designed in sort of a similar fashion. The problem is twofold with drive chains. It requires a soft fork of the protocol. So he needs Bitcoin Core devs to decide to make a fundamental change and push it out in the core client. And I just don't see that happening for him at all. They don't care. They don't like the idea. They don't think Bitcoin needs to be useful for anything that he's talking about. And unless there's a deep fundamental cultural change in BTC, it's just never going to happen. So I think that's kind of the end of the argument. He would argue, no, I'm the one who's bridging the gap between small blockers and big blockers. So the small blockers get what they want at the consensus level, and the big blockers get what they want at the application level, all because of BIP 300 and my drive chains company, I think it's called Layer 2 Labs. And I think it's a pipe dream. I just don't think it's ever going to happen.
Okay, so it sounds like no matter, it may be a feasible idea and it may actually work and be good, but it requires lobbying, it sounds like, of the community or of the actual
which he's been doing
devs
for years. It's been a long time now. It's been
a lot of lobbying. So
since the block size war. I mean, this is 2016 and 17. He was proposing, hey, don't fork the network, add drive chains. And it's gotten more serious the last probably 4 years or so, but it's still like it is years of him putting in this lobbying for like, just make this small change and I'll fix all your problems. They don't care.
So, since now your view on it is that, well, why not just go back to the base layer? It's all existing right now. Is that what your position is?
Exactly. Like Bitcoin solves this is the phrase that people like to use. And it is very, very true right here.
Yeah. Yeah. So we don't need to have the other. It sounds like that's why go to the all these other methods if we already have a base layer that operates this way.
Precisely.
Now, I think the position that I've heard, the problem with it, well, there's not enough volume or demand, or maybe all the exchanges banned it. They got this delisting, and then there's more. Yeah. Oh, did you hear about OKX potentially has now gotten rid of BSV? Apparently,
I've heard.
Yeah. And then I saw Jack Pitts mentioning that. So, I mean, less people are able to get it even more. It's gone. Yeah. Is that the argument on the other side?
It's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, volume and liquidity are good. However, if 95% of the volume and liquidity hates you, I don't know that it's good, because it creates the opportunity to use your own asset's volume to short the asset itself. It's Like there has been a predatory relationship between exchanges and BSV for a long time, and it mirrors in a lot of ways like commodities, derivatives markets, and silver. Like there's some absurd amount, like multiple of paper silver as there exists physical silver in the entire world, and that paper silver trades in such a way that holds down the spot price of silver for like 20 years now. At some point, there probably will be a silver squeeze because of it, but people need to understand why, or, I think it's a why. A lot of people would say silver just isn't valuable, but I think it is. And if it, people start to realize, then they'll say like, oh, there's a huge opportunity to make a 10x move on silver because of how stupid it's been held down with these paper derivative assets and predatory shorting and a lot of this kind of stuff. And I think BSV is in a similar situation. Now, you are talking about going up against the magnates of finance in your industry, and how do you beat everybody? And that's really the problem. Is I think BSV tried to take on too many fights at one time and was not capitalized enough to do it. I was thinking of the line from that Thor movie with the Rock character. He's in prison and he says, "Well, why are you here?" And he says, "Well, I tried to start a revolution, didn't hand out enough pamphlets," and so he's sitting in prison. And I think BSV is in the same situation. We tried to start a revolution and we didn't hand out enough pamphlets, and now we've shot ourselves in the foot in a lot of ways because would it be better if we just had more money circulating? The answer is yes. Is OKX or was OKX ever an ally or going to help us get there? I think the answer is probably no. So I think it's a net, like, I don't know, is it good or bad that BSV is being delisted from OKX? I don't think anybody was going to spill into OKX and suddenly pump BSV 10x anyways, but the kick in volume and liquidity has its own problems. So again, double-edged sword.
Yeah. So how about the okay, I saw you reporting at the Babage Hackathon, and I wanted to ask you about your feedback on that. I haven't heard any long form content from you on that. So maybe you could kind of like go into your perspective as how things went and what you experienced there.
So it was shocking, frankly. I assumed, so we brought a team to compete. Gorilla Pool had an idea for using ordinal tokens to resolve namespace records. This concept called OpNS. Basically, how do you use a token as your paymail identity, and you can pay Kurt at literally any domain that's on the blockchain. Pretty cool idea, I thought. And we figured there'd be 3-4 teams, and worst case scenario, we take a third prize or something, make a little money, have some fun in Austin, Texas. Turns out it was like 15 teams and 35 people or whatever showed up competing. So it was a packed house to the point where we were like stressing the infrastructure of the space, like the internet and everything else. And I was like, oh, shoot, like there's some actual good competitive people in this thing. And they ended up giving out 7 prizes or something like that, and we didn't even place. So there's my gorilla ego, right there, getting like, oh, hey, everybody else is going to do better than you. So I mean, ultimately, it was awesome. Met a lot of good people. We had fun, anyways. It was not like there was no ill will to the fact that we didn't place, but ultimately, it was really cool event. It was cool to see a lot of people showing up both locally and traveling from afar to say, hey, cool, there's a $50,000 prize. I bet I could win it. And the guy that won it was brand new to BSV. So he was a guy that had a little bit of experience, kind of vaguely understands blockchain, but he was just a general purpose dev and got dragged into it and said, hey, we bet you could win. And turns out he won it. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, what I'm hearing from Mitch about that was that Mitch actually just went and picked him up he picked him up and said, hey, we're going, you're getting in the car, we're going, what is it? You're going with me. And he just brought him and he's like, let's do it. And then he ended up winning.
Yeah.
So he'd never heard of anybody or didn't know anybody at all at the space except Mitch. So yeah, that's really cool. I mean, what's so unique about, Babage? I mean, it's a language, or it's a special purpose way to operate, or what is the?
It's a little bit difficult to explain if you don't have development experience. I think for the average person, think of it as like logic in an operating system. So like Gorilla Pool supports a number of things. Like we like Bitcoin schema and one sat ordinals, and like these are all kind of building blocks that if you were to put them together, you could say it's kind of like using Mac OS, right? And then Babage is a competing set of those same principles. Lots of overlap. We don't actually disagree on the how to about almost anything. It's literally just we kind of have our own way of thinking about it, but the way that we think about it is very similar, and that it is like peer-to-peer first as a concept. Like things that need to be indexed should be indexed in this particular way, like overlays instead of like node level indexing, for example, and lots of other things like that. But so I like to think of Babage as like Microsoft Windows, and like the Bitcoin schema and Gorilla Pool stack stuff, the banana stack, I like to call it, as like Mac OS. So like they're both just ways ultimately to use the system, access the internet, maintain your files, so it does lots of little things. And yeah, so that's probably the simplest way to understand it. At a low level, there's lots and lots of other things. So it's a lot of stuff is abstracted away. Like, okay, how do I build a wallet backend for my application? And Babage has a couple of clicks way to do that. And if that didn't exist, you'd have to sit and code the thing for yourself. It might take you 2 weeks, but instead it takes you 10 minutes once you just kind of define your parameters, and you can run, I think they call it MetaNet Desktop is their internal wallet system. And it's like, it's really nice, really robust, works really well. And it simplifies a lot of that stuff. So instead of having to build the whole stack and spend, who knows, 500 or 1,000 hours defining all these parameters before you actually build your application, you can use the Babage stack of tools, or you can use Bitcoin schema, which would be my preference, but you can use the Babage stack of tools and get a huge jump start. And within a day or two, you are building your app. You're not trying to maintain all this low-level infrastructure and middleware and connection points, and it's bonkers.
I see. So it's software, kind of like software, I guess, and it shortcuts everything so you can build on the network, fast or much easier. I see. All right. So, I know you're the Bitcoin historian. So, I just there's so many things that are happening in Bitcoin story and stuff that are a lot of it you'd probably consider drama. But I got to ask you, about what your perspective is on these trial videos getting released. I just saw today it was Stephen Matthews is now, his testimony's out, and I'm like, man, I listened to it again, and there was things I don't remember hearing the first time. So it's kind of good that it came out. One of the things was the Ager Hansen. He mentioned the Ager Hansen. You can give a little background on that for what happened. He mentioned Ager Hansen came into his office. He's pounding his desk, and this was every other day. This is on the record. Now, the perspective about the end of the trial, and this is my perspective, is that they sanctioned Matthews for saying these things.
Yep.
He just came in and told his truth, and they said, "You're sanctioned, Mr. Matthews.
Clearly lying." Yeah.
You cannot do that. He's like, I was asked to testify. What did?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's so from my perspective, a couple of things. The fact that it leaked, I don't understand British law. I'm an American, so my commentary, if inaccurate, should come from a place of complete ignorance and good faith. But as I understand it, it's probably illegal in the UK that content is being distributed. And so if that's the case, then poo-poo, like I don't like it. I don't like the fact that anybody's breaking the law in that situation. That being said, the sort of libertarian, revolutionary, rabble-rouser, Bitcoiner part of me is saying, you know what? Thank God this is actually on the record, because while transcripts are on the record and whatever, you're really not going to get a whole lot of people that are going to read 2 weeks worth of dialogue via transcript unless they're super invested in the content. And who's going to be that invested in the content? Like, frankly, it's a bunch of weirdos on both sides. It's your like, I hate Craig more than anything in the universe, or I love Craig more than anything in the universe, and that's the kind of people who are going to be reading it. That, and folks like me and you who work in media and try to digest this stuff and explain it to average people. But the video content, gives people the opportunity to see, okay, did Craig seem sincere on the stand, versus the way it was editorialized or reading it in text or whatever, like people, it's funny because I remember watching it and typing like, I think Craig seems really confident here, or writing about the attorneys on the other side. I forget the guy's name, but like eating his pen the whole time, and like he seemed very wigged out, stressed out, etc. Whereas Craig, 99% of the time, seemed very confident, seemed to have very measured responses to things, and the opposing counsel seemed to be very stressed out the whole time. And like that's kind of how I read it. Now, if you were to read from any one of the koala bears or anon laser folk who were doing their take was the exact opposite. Oh, Craig visibly stressed out, like tugging at his collar, and my goodness, were the folks from Copa's counsel, like they just were lions of truth and this kind of thing. And so I'm like, okay, well, I guess we see the world differently about this too. But so yeah, the spillover benefit, it's like the same thing. It's how do you feel about Julian Assange, or how do you feel about any one of these like WikiLeaks style, like, oh wow, the CIA is doing a bunch of illegal stuff, and it's like, well, it's bad that the secrets have got, like, that's definitely illegal, but it's good that we now know that, hey, there's been lots of malfeasances happening in the government, right? And so again, double-edged sword situation. I certainly don't condone doing that kind of thing because it's A, illegal, and B, reputationally risky, and who knows whatever could come from it. But it's been really interesting rewatching it because it's been about a year now, and I was in a weird spot myself. I was recovering from surgery and on a lot of drugs and stuff while watching the case live, and so it's weird to watch it from a fresh perspective, and all healed up and able to rewatch. And like you said, a lot of those things, I'm like, yeah, that's I'm still in the same position I was before. Like, I have not changed my mind rewatching things. So
and I remember watching your coverage of the Kleiman trial every day you were in Florida. You were watching. I remember you were doing your meetings. You're going to the courtroom every single day. That was such amazing content. I recommend everybody go back and watch that if it's still out there somewhere. I don't know.
Should be.
But,
yeah.
But I mean, it was so good, and it seemed like that in the case, and Craig's counsel's completely was all used against him as opposed to support him. Anything that went on in Kleiman, somehow Copa construed it to say that was all fraud and lies over there in Kleiman. And it came back on Craig, which should have been just the opposite in the way the law works. And I mean, he actually won that case in Kleiman. So, well, maybe you could give a little context with what happened in the background of Kleiman, because it's almost, it seems like it's been forgotten now, and it's so important.
So it's interesting. I didn't get a ton of time to talk to the attorneys in that case, but I actually had rapport with both sides. So I ended up having decent conversations with Kleiman's counsel and Craig's, and they both largely because we were there for, I don't even know, it was 5 or 6 weeks. It really was a season in that courtroom. But I think the thing that really stood out there is how much both sides really seem to care, A, about their client, but B, about getting the record straight. Like, they really wanted to tell the story accurately, as they saw it anyways, or at the very least, they were doing their best to tell the story the way they wanted it to be understood. And I remember in the Kleiman trial, at some point during the middle of the trial, realizing that their client wants to prove that Craig is Satoshi so that Craig has to pay IRA, this money back, billions of dollars. But at some point, it became very clear that the attorneys, they were trying to cast doubt on Craig having anything to do with Bitcoin at all, which strikes me as this bizarre conflict of interest at the get-go, right? Like, why would you be making fun of Craig's inability to understand Bitcoin? That undermines your client, which then implies maybe IRA's not the client, right? Like, did IRA take a payout already, like sold the litigation to some other funder or whatever? And as I recall, that ended up being the case. And I don't know that we know who those people are.
Oh, that actually happened? It sold his rights to the litigation.
it seems to be the case, which is why he's still trying to claw into, other things that, in regards to Ramona and who actually owned WNK. And there's lots of little bits of this litigation that kind of keep happening, even though it's like, okay, now we're done. Okay, now we're really done. And now we're really, really done. It's like, no. Like, here's this next thing in, Palm Beach County Court or whatever. And it's weird. So there was a lot of weird stuff about that case. And I remember Craig's attorneys, who also didn't seem to have a really good grasp of how big a lot of this is. Like, it's like they don't understand the politics, right? So it's like, imagine you gave an attorney from outer space 6 weeks or 6 months to prepare to present a legal case in court about the Israel versus Palestine conflict, right? And it's like, well, you can talk about the Camp David Accords, who's doing the Camp David stuff, right? Did Yasser Arafat have the right to sign that agreement? And what's Bibi Netanyahu? But this is all, the last 25, 30 years, right? You could go back to the Balfour Declaration, World War I era, or you could go back to, the book of Joshua, frankly, and, start making an argument there. And you have to have a huge amount of context in order to actually treat the whole story with complete accuracy. But lawyers are not going to do that, because it's not about getting the absolute truth on the record. It's about winning the case. And so both sides tried to play their best hand. And I remember talking to Craig's attorneys and saying, hey guys, just so you know, there's some other context that you're sort of underlying here about this whole Bitcoin civil war. And there's lots of big money. We're not just talking about IRA. IRA represents this whole thing where you had Gregory Maxwell immediately writing takedown posts about why Craig can't be Satoshi, the moment he was doxxed. And then you have, well, who doxxed him and why? And then who hacked Satoshi in 2014? Actually outed him and was threatening guys like Peter Todd and Thamos and some of these other people. And none of this stuff was addressed. And who would have the incentive to do such a thing? And then who kicked Satoshi out of, various things? And so there's just there's all this massive back context that no reasonable person could understand. And even if you're paid to understand it, if you're not passionate about it, you're not going to get it deeply. You're gonna say, okay, yeah, he was hacked, but wouldn't he doesn't everybody kind of get hacked sometimes? And how could this guy get hacked this deeply 6 or 7 times and whatever? And it's well, if he's Satoshi Nakamoto, he's the ultimate honeypot, right? He is the biggest honeypot in the history of honeypots. So you should expect for him to have malicious actors attacking him more than anybody else gets attacked. And but again, that requires a little bit of okay, I'm going to suspend my disbelief about whether he is or isn't, and then say, okay, what would this person look like if he was Satoshi Nakamoto? And so there's a lot of layers of stuff that maybe we'll never get peeled all the way back, because again, it's just, maybe too much. I think it's definitely too much for a normal person. It's probably too much for a 10-part miniseries. And if you were to write a book about it, it would be a Strong's Concordance of the New Testament. It's what? Who would write 10,000 pages about what's ultimately, 100 pages of the New Testament? It's well, if it matters, people are going to spend a lot of time cross-referencing, cataloging, and doing all this stuff. And so we'll see how it plays out. But yes, Kleiman was a very weird trial to observe.
And coming in, really reading the 20. So right before the Copa case was really brought to trial, the Kleiman 11th Circuit opinion came down, and that was affirming the trial court's ruling on the jury trial. And they went through and wrote a nice opinion. And I just remember I was like, oh, this is great timing. I mean, it was just, I mean, in my, logical mind, I think this is actually going to likely support Craig, because it says in the very first sentence, it's about resolving the origins of Bitcoin. Right. The origins. This is a dispute about the origins of Bitcoin. We're going to resolve that. We've resolved this now. It's a matter of law. It's all resolved. Mm-hmm. And that right there tells me, I mean, they didn't use the word Satoshi Nakamoto. That's really the only variance.
Yeah.
It's a big variance, but still, the origins
It
itself
is.
were resolved.
It's such a weird thing. I mean, it's like you can consume content forever. And I mean, there's whole schools of thought and university courses for hundreds of years now about like, were Adam and Eve an actual physical couple that occurred in history? Or are they some kind of an analogy that helps us put together a billion years of human evolution and all these different things that came together to create mankind as it exists today? And it's like, well, how could you ever actually answer that question? You cannot scientifically answer that question, or at least we can't yet, right? And the reason is we can't reach all the way back in time. Most of the data that would help us answer the question is probably gone. And if anybody knows hidden answers that could help us make a breakthrough, for whatever reason, they have no incentive to give that information out to the public so that we can make a leap forward. And so you're stuck on, having hundreds of people at, PhD level doing little rabbit hole work until they hit some dead end. And like, okay, that's as far as I can go until I hit some breakthrough somewhere, or somebody gives me a hint that allows me to go forward. And right now, that's the Satoshi Nakamoto story. Like, you have half truths and whispers and guys in dark rooms that claim they've got a piece of evidence. And if you look at it, like, maybe it's real or maybe it's nonsense, and the incentives all suck, and there's no money in getting it right because ultimately it's just a story that is interesting, but what's the value of knowing that whole story? Like, it's just interesting for historical sake, but
in a legal perspective, it's kind of funny because now we've got, as a matter of law over there in the UK anyways, we know at least one guy is not Satoshi Nakamoto. That's for sure. Everybody else, they're free game, right? That's how the UK has decided. So.
Thanks, UK. Always on it.
We got rid of that one guy, but now let's see who else we can get rid of.
There's 8 billion others to look into.
Yeah, so... what really excites me about Bitcoin is like the peer-to-peer side. I mean, like where are we at? Like, I mean, there's money that's out. There's money, the stablecoin that's out now that they were there at the hackathon. I mean, where are we at I mean, I heard about this text BSV or text money thing that's going on. Brett talked to me about it. And so like, where are we at with like adoption and what are you excited about with peer-to-peer stuff that, in Bitcoin and that you're really like excited about? You see that people should be looking into or building on, or entrepreneurs should be doing right now?
So there's a few big ones. Actually, I think the stuff going on with money, stablecoins in general, I think is one of the biggest opportunities in the space. It's something that BSV has been lacking. A lot of networks are able to create in-network liquidity that keeps people on the network, keeps people trading. So that's like Tether and Ethereum. They wouldn't exist without each other. Same with like wrapped BTC and allowing that to be collateral in a contract to take out loans and do other things. I think if Bitcoin is not going to be adopted as a cash first, and I think it's pretty obvious that that's not how, in fact, I think that boat has sailed, then the next thing would be, okay, so then what is the next thing that gets adopted that allows cash to exist? And I think that response is probably finance. Now, finance means, okay, so you have to collateralize something in order to issue something that is useful in the economy. And this is how we got fiat currency. It's a long story. But stablecoins allow us to create financial vehicles that allow the network to be useful for things like basic finance. So that would be loans, various debt vehicles, derivative assets, trading, et cetera. And I think that's a pretty good place for BSV to really make some inroads with people because, like, for example, and this is the dumbest example, but it's also the best example, is this Trump coin that launched on Solana like 2 days before the inauguration. I think that Trump was testing Solana. Like, somebody tells him, it's probably Eric Trump or one of his other kids being like, hey man, Solana's scalable. And the response to that is somebody like Donald Trump will be like, all right, launch a Trump coin on it. Let's see how the network responds. Well, the network completely crashed. All the trading apps crashed. All the wallets crashed. Like, it couldn't take it.
Everything failed. Huh?
Everything failed.
Wow.
And so like the network itself was down for some amount of time. So what does it tell us? Well, it tells us that, Solana cannot deal with, a massive pump of interest. And so for the same reason that Ethereum sucks and the same reason that BTC sucks, Solana also sucks, just at a different rung. And so that's, it's just reality. And that's good. We know that now.
We've ruled that out now. At least, I mean, I would imagine those people are not dumb. If it's already failed, then they're not going to go back to it to try to. That's
Yeah,
how
I
I
mean,
think.
it is what it is. So how do you move on? So I think that being able to create bridges, and this is all stuff that's being worked on. Gorilla Pool has like kind of a skunkworks team that was working on sort of the how-tos and like, should we build a DEX and should we build this and should we build a bridge and how, like, that kind of thing. We also maintain like some of the infrastructure for like one sat ordinals. That's the nature of our Jungle Bus tool. I think, in my opinion, anything that allows stable coins to be traded against other assets and for there to be in-network use of the things that are on the chain, meaning that you never have to go back through an OKX and back to your bank, and you never have to go over, like, you never have to leave the network in order to continue to just create value. That's the magic sauce. That's the cookie that you want to eat, right? And so we have that ability. And if we had the ability to allow your basic Solana person or your basic Ethereum person or whatever to like, oh, okay, I can pretty trivially wrap an asset, move it over here, trade it on BSV. Cool. Same thing with BTC. I like, hey man, if there's $5 trillion in locked up value over on BTC, like, cool. Make a wallet that has both assets in it. You can wrap your BTC, put it on BSV, and use some, Gorilla DEX or whatever the hell ends up existing. Like, cool. Do your trading over there. Trade 50 million times for the cost of a few pennies, and then transact it back out to BTC if you must. But if you're already using BSV and you realize, like, hey man, like this Bitcoin actually works, does all the stuff that Bitcoin always said it could, like, that's how you start making the case. And this is like, my analog is, it's like missions work. It's very much, you can go to the third world or some place where people like don't know how to filter water, just don't have the infrastructure to clean things and farm properly. You teach them like, hey, crop rotation, or like these kind of basic principles, and you 10x their lives. Well, then all of a sudden, within a generation, they start to become allies, and they start to become people that are bringing value back to you. And I think that's kind of the opportunity here. And so I see that. I see giving financial tools to the people that have lots of money but have crappy tools. That's a big opportunity. I think text BSV, text money, and anything in the money ecosystem, I think, are some good examples of technology that was needed. And now you got to build that next level, the apps and the bridges and all of that. And then anything to do with social media. I think anything that allows you to very simply monetize social media is massive. It's a massive thing. My criticism is that so far, all the people that have done it want you to join their network. And I understand why. Everybody wants to be the next Instagram, OnlyFans, TikTok, Twitch wanted to be Twitter, these kind of things. But what I think should be done is make it a wrapper, make it a client to some other thing. Like, how can you take your X account and have people say, hey, if you access X using my app, you can immediately monetize. You can pay me through here. Just tip me through here. It's a little bit like what Patreon does, or it's kind of what they advertise they do. It doesn't really work that way either, because they're still using TradFi payment rails and stuff. But ultimately, building your social media app such that other social media apps work inside of it. So you're using Bitcoin itself like a browser. Now everything is monetized because you're viewing the internet through a Bitcoin lens. And now it's like, oh, I'll tip you a penny, or I'll subscribe here, or here's my digital identity token, or, all these other things. I think it needs to look more like that.
So like with X, Kurt, in order for that to happen, does it require a corporate decision, or are you saying that potentially, let's say, entrepreneurs could actually build an app and make that happen?
I'm saying that, like, the disruptive thing for Twitch to have done, and I like the Twitch guys, they're friends, but I think that the way that Twitch could have been done better in hindsight, and I didn't have this idea at the time, so I'm not going to say like I told them and they didn't listen and I'm a genius and they would have been rich if they listened to me. It's not the case. But if I could jump back to like circa 2018, my advice to them would have been, guys, make Twitch a Twitter client. So use the open Twitter API. You use Twitch as an app to access Twitter. And then, you advertise to people that if you use Twitter through Twitch, then you can use all these monetization, and you can set the Twitch that tool and all this other stuff. So you're using it like a browser. It's your window into Twitter. And if you use that window, then you can have the micropayments and all this other stuff. And now they sort of did a variation of that, but it wasn't the first iteration. Like, I don't know if it was like Twitch 2.0, Twitch 3.0, or whatever. They started to have a little bit of a recursive relationship between Twitch.com and Twitter.com, where the content could be mirrored and you can kind of absorb one way or another. But it was still a little convoluted. You still really kind of had to understand why and like what was actually happening and all this other stuff. I think if it started with download Twitch to monetize Twitter, and it worked out the gate, I think they would have had 1 million users on year one. They could have been taking fees from 1 million users, and the average person there could be taking like, wow, my Twitter like gets me a penny. And then all the influencers and stuff that they brought in, you're like Zuby and they had a bunch of big Twitter people that joined Twitch to check it out. But the cross interface part of it was just it was one step too far, I think, for people to really understand it. So I think they needed to be sandwiched on each other, and they needed to use Twitter through Twitch and monetize it in that way. Now, if we go there, somebody does that right, builds it right, markets it right, and then has a huge budget to really reach out to real influencers to get them to say like, hey, are you still using the x.com client? Like, use this client, monetize it with Bitcoin. Like, I think it's huge. I think that is a big thing that is not being done well by anybody. Nope, I've never heard anybody else propose to do it that way. I think that's the way to do it.
I agree, man. That would be amazing if we could have a way to get inside of keep people on X, because that's where the things are now, and they're going to keep going that way. I don't see it slowing down. If we could somehow build the nexus between Bitcoin, whether it's Twitch or Tree Chat is a new one, and the nexus in between the two of those, and that way people don't have to go on a separate app that
for sure
not as popular. You know, I mean. All right, Kurt. So what could people look forward to tomorrow? Potentially a show on CoinGeek every Tuesday. You're doing your show at 11.
Yep.
Right.
That's I think we're gonna 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, sir. Yep. We're due to the CoinGeek weekly live stream. We got a bunch of cool stuff coming out at Gorilla Pool. CoinGeek, I got my article, comes out at typically 9 a.m. Eastern time on Tuesdays as well. I'm writing about, actually, no, it's a secret. I'm not going to tell anybody yet, but I try to maintain that. CoinGeek's got some cool stuff going on. They've cleaned up kind of the editorial slant a little bit. There's some good people working on cool stuff really consistently. I had Gavin Lucas on the show last week, and he's just like this really kick-ass high-level generalist and touches on a lot of really good stuff. And so I think we're finally past this era of like big ego, fluffy promises and whatever. Like the right people are finally in the right positions to really kick a lot of ass. And that's happening in a big way and on a lot of things. And so I am pumped. I think we're about to enter a real accelerationist era.
Yeah. Yeah, I will say people who are influencers I'm talking to, I mean, they've never heard of BSV, Bitcoin, the original version. They've never even heard of it. So it's starting to get in the consciousness about the possibilities that Bitcoin can scale and these things. It's starting to get, what it's actually can do these things. And so, you probably don't hear this enough, but I just want to thank you, man, for what you've done, because without you, I wouldn't, and a lot of other people wouldn't have be able to have that perspective on the whole history of Bitcoin, the block size debates, and with your knowledge on the technology interfaced with media at the same time. It's just a unique. You're in this one diamond in the rough. Person. There isn't any other. There's no one else, man. You're not replaceable. So keep training with the black belt. Keep yourself strong and healthy, and your family and your kids, man. Guys, really, I really send that in my best regards and appreciate what you've done. So
thank you so much, Gavin. You are very kind, especially coming from you, like one of the other people who's really consistently doing good content. And putting themselves out there as an individual. Like, that's
Yeah.
you're
Thank
killing
you.
it, man. I could literally say ditto everything you just said to me. Like, thanks for being you, Gavin.
Yeah, thank you. And I hope that we can encourage other people together to say, putting yourself out there, you're not going to be right. You're not going to be perfect. Just start.
Yeah.
Just start and don't be afraid. I mean, it's like when I started, it's like I had no idea what I was doing, and I still a lot of times have no idea what I'm doing. Okay, I really I'll admit, but it didn't matter. I just started, and so just start and then be consistent.
Yep.
And,
For
and
sure.
it will grow.
Amen to
So
that.
yeah. Thank you, Kurt. Let's do it again sometime. I greatly appreciate you coming on, man. Seriously. Thank you.
For sure.
All right. See you at the top, everybody. Hit the ones and be sure to follow Kurt on X at what is it?
Kurt Wuckert Jr.
At Kurt Wuckert Jr. Got it. All right. Later, guys.